Welcome to the Inside Reality, the podcast where hypocrisy dies and naked observations bring truth to light. Here we strip away the surface and get to the heart of what really is going on, sharing untold stories, challenging the status quo, and dividing the raw and unfiltered truths. So if you're ready for some bold conversations and insights, that cuts through the noise, you're in the right place. Let's step inside and see the world for what it really is. I'm your host, Jimmy Tran, along with Jeffrey Candelaria, and we're here to just have a conversation and invite you to be a part of that. So welcome. Hey, Jeffrey,
Absolutely.
good to see you.
Yes, absolutely. Always looking to search for truth, even though I don't really think there is a universal truth. We can even talk about that at some point. I don't think there's anything called a ubiquitous universal truth, but we seek it out anyway, kind of like the Holy Grail. I don't really think it's around, but people still seek it out, right?
Yeah. Well, I think there's truths and facts, right? I mean, this is the whole discussion in the world of philosophy where there's a distinction between truths and facts. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I think that there is a sense of absolute truth, but we perceive truth individually differently based on the set of facts that we each have, right? And so that's one important point or
Yeah.
factor
No,
in the.
I don't think I don't think there are immutable truths. I don't think so. So if you're on Jupiter, for example, the gaseous Jovian planet, the largest planet in our solar system, right?
Yeah,
For example, people ask how old you are, and our truth is it's based on solar years. So
sure.
you're probably 43 or whatever the hell you are, but if you're on Jupiter, you'd be like 3 years old.
Yeah,
So there's one example of people accepting an immutable universal truth age in terms of how it's measured. But depending on where you are in the universe relative to the sun, if you use that as a measuring marker, and I'm telling you, if you told someone, because the average person is dumber than a rock, that if they lived on Pluto, they wouldn't even be 1 year old relative to our measurement. They
yeah,
wouldn't they wouldn't even understand the construct.
yeah.
So
Well, I mean, they would if that's how it's defined in their I mean, if we were to take our world, right, the people and everything in our world, and we transplant that, so basically all of our parameters of existence or whatever, right, is transferred to Pluto. Obviously, using that same logic, we revolve around the sun, the one revolution, right? So it'd be 70. I think it's like 77 years for the Pluto to cycle around the sun, right? And so that would be the measuring rod, I guess you could say, right? I mean, everything is relative to something that we define.
that's thank you for making my case, Jimmy. There's no
Yeah.
immutable truth because we,
Well,
the existentialists, would say that that perception predates stimulation. So we bring our own biases and interpretations of truth to whatever we're perceiving in whatever
yeah,
space and time situation we're cognizant of.
yeah,
So
correct.
just by definition, you and I looking at a pen, PEN, will never see the same pen the same way. It's not going to happen because we bring our own perspective and bias and all of that to it. So I just don't think there's such a thing as immutable truth. However, we have frames of references that as civilization and populations we agree with. Like
Yeah,
people agree that there's Thursday and it's 1:30 p.m. and your name is Jimmy and we're supposed to recognize you as Asian, whatever the hell all that is. So we have these constructs, these frame of references, just so we can have, I guess you'd say, similar platforms by which we can interact with each other
yeah.
and do
I mean, and
business
that
and all that.
Yep, yep. I mean, definitely we need that kind of agreed upon set of rules, or I wouldn't say even rules is not the right term, but rules is kind of the next level, right? I mean,
Frames
we
of
have to,
references.
yeah. I mean, like language is one of those constructs, right? I mean, so yeah, I mean, you probably speak other languages. I know I do. I speak several other languages, and so the words, definitely have various meanings. It might even sound exactly the same,
Yeah.
but it has different
Parlez-vous,
meanings because
parlez-vous
they're
français?
assigned differently.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ça va bien? Parlez-vous français? S'il vous
Sprechen Sie
plaît?
Deutsch?
Je ne sais quoi. Yeah. Speak some French.
Yeah.
But
So
anyway, you wanted to talk about something today that I think is really important, the digital divide. And again, this program is Inside Reality, where we dive right into whatever we think populations accept as reality, right, Jimmy? Whatever the narrative is, whatever the buzz, B-U-Z-Z is, we try to bring that whole topic or construct and we dissect it and we try to give it an emotional analysis and a logical analysis. Because keep in mind, there's the limbic part of our brain, which is emotion, and then the cortex part, which is more like the analytics. And I always ask people when I ask them a question, how do you feel about something? Jimmy, what do you think about that? Two
yeah.
different things. Two
Yes,
absolutely
exactly.
different things. And I think if we were a more learned, enlightened society, we would collectively always ask the question in those two ways. What do you think about it?
Minimally.
And how do you feel about it?
Yeah.
Because
And definitely,
we've become an emotional feel society instead of a logical society. As a baby boomer, that's what bugs me the most. We used to be analytics first, a meritocracy, achievement. Now it's like, how do you feel? As opposed to what do you think?
yeah. Well, we definitely need both. I mean, that's the general construct of even our brain, right? I mean, our brain is we have, people like to say, the left side, right side, but more specifically, we have a structured brain and an unstructured brain. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And the feeling part of it is definitely more on the unstructured side, and then the structured side, it's the logic and construct like
Yeah, but
that.
you
So,
don't win wars based on feeling. Okay, you win wars, I think, based on
well,
strategy,
that's correct.
logic and armament and making tough decisions. And it's
Yeah,
not like, what do I do? What do I do? You shoot your freaking enemy dead, you win a war. Don't get
yeah.
mad. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for those militiamen, defeating a lot of the English
English and so forth. Yeah.
and
I mean, well, that is actually where it raises some interesting questions because, I mean, in our modern world, so to speak, right, our modern sensibility has a certain level of filter. And there is one thing that we do often is we take our modern filter and we apply it to history, and we expect them, because we don't, I mean, history, I mean, like, okay, we weren't there. I mean, we can extrapolate based on the results that we have, or based on what somebody had wrote about back in back in that time, right? But we don't know for sure with definite, right? And so there is that part of the conversation as well. And so when we project our values onto that
I don't I
time,
don't think it's just values. I think it's a lot of intellectuals drinking their latte in their nice air conditioned house, overlooking their lawn and
well, that's
judging,
because
some
yeah,
historical precedent or some historical situation. A lot of
yeah,
people don't realize in World War II, not that long ago, 70, 80 years ago, 40, 50 million people died across
yes,
this
yeah,
globe,
yeah,
right? We absolutely take for granted the gravity and the immense sacrifice by the Russians, by the Australians, by actually Winston Churchill. He's the first one to take on the Nazis. We didn't come into the war till like years later, you know,
yeah.
and we sat back passively and watched the Nazis basically take over. What was it? Poland,
Yep.
Switzerland, uh,
Austria,
Austria,
Czechoslovakia. I
and then they
mean,
had the Battle of Britain in 1940, 41. And
yeah,
we just sat back and we allowed that appeasement nonsense to take place. And it was Russia and that had a pact, as you know, with
yep,
Hitler. And then
yep,
Hitler went and Hitler then reneged on the pact
Reneged on it. Yep.
through Project Barbarossa. Had he not done that, we may not even be here,
Yeah.
because they would have had the allyship with Japan, Russia, and that would have been all the technology and armament and science that the Germans had. Who knows, man? Anyway, let's remember that these wars had a moral content to them. So, to your point about the limbic part of our brain, was it immoral to wipe out Hiroshima, Nagasaki later on? Was it immoral to wipe out civilian populations in Berlin, right? In other parts of Germany that were manufacturing? And that's the part of the emotion that did play into some of the decision making. But in the final analysis, the frontal cortex part of the brain, where the generals and Eisenhower and a lot of them decided, we need to just wipe them out, annihilate the Germans, annihilate ultimately the Japanese, no offense, because the outcome would have been, in the Japanese War, for example, in the Atlantic Theater in 1945, it's estimated we would have lost, when I say we, the United States would have lost 1 million to 3 million guys, most, 98% men, invading Japan. Anyway, I'm on a little bit of a tangent, but it comes back to your point that these immense decisions that countries make, there is some emotion that goes into the moral aspect and the ethical aspect of decision making.
Well, and that's true. And we definitely see that if you look at the fallout, or not fallout, maybe the after World War II, right? I mean, if you look at in terms of U.S. involvement, right? I mean, after World War II, of course, the Soviet Union rose, evolved and gained a great deal of traction there. And so the feeling or the need to hold back, the advancement of communism and so forth, right? And so the Cold War ensued. And if we look, we can also see, like, for instance, we had the Korean War that was really roughly a decade later. Okay, so it wasn't even that far, right? Now, of course, the world was still at war. I mean, the French and the North Vietnamese were at odds, right after World War II.
1954, 1953. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but there was already there was also already conflict in Vietnam in 46. Literally a year after. I mean, so
point. Yeah.
Before the full on fight with the French, and then of course, we get in later, and so forth. So we can see that there's a whole string of actions that ensue. Like, for instance, in our modern situation today, right? There's this conversation, or there's a lot of discussion about North Korea in Ukraine, or not Ukraine, in Russia right now, right? And some have argued that they've already entered in and are fighting, in Ukraine also, right? And if you look at the history, you'll see that the situation with Korea was actually not. I mean, there was a ceasefire. We never actually. It was not like the war didn't end. It was just a ceasefire that's, and some argue today that we are now, the Korean War is, the ceasefire ended basically when they start firing again, because the whole situation in Ukraine is really a proxy war, right? I mean, that's what most experts believe. It's a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia and or China as part of this.
I think what you're saying is, after World War II, it's not like you had harmony and kumbaya. You had all these power structures in various levels of capacity left behind, right?
Correct.
You had, and keep in mind, without World War II, the United States wouldn't have had all the economic immense power,
correct,
the manufacturing capacity, the population explosion. Many would argue, economically, geopolitically, sociologically, that World War II excelled the United States
absolutely
to supremacy amongst the world, because had it not been for World War II, I mean, Russia, China, maybe even England, maybe Germany, had they not had the whole Nazi thing go on, could have been the superlative geopolitical powers, and the United States might have been fourth, fifth, sixth place had it
Yes.
not been for World War II. So that was the
Correct.
other side of the coin. Whatever you think of the United States, I happen to think it's a pretty corrupt place. But like Winston Churchill said, democracy's bad, but everything else is worse, right? So
Yeah.
I still thank God I'm here, but
Yes.
it's fraught with corruption. But anyway, to your point, all these power structures were left behind World War II in various states of capacity.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, things don't, I mean, people and ideologies don't just disappear overnight, right? I mean, just because the war ended, it may have gone, like, for instance, here's an example of something that we've seen emerging, right? I mean, so in a way, the communist threat, for instance, here in the United States is probably much greater today than it was during the Cold War.
Well,
Okay,
yeah,
and here's,
look at
here,
Bernie Sanders. He's an open
well,
communist, and
yeah,
he's probably supported by millions and millions, openly supported by millions and millions of other Americans. Whereas in 1951, 52, you had McCarthy that was accusing me, and just by virtue of that accusation, you were condemned.
yes. And that's, and that's definitely not, I mean, it's not a right or wrong in that regard. I'm just saying that we're seeing that, right? I mean, for instance, when the Soviet Union fell, right, in 89 or 88, I forget.
89, 89,
So
90.
yeah. So when that whole thing collapsed, right, what it did was that it left a lot of people out in the cold, so to speak, right? I mean, if you're thinking about all the spies that were here, okay, literally had no connection to Mother Russia, right? I mean, if it was the Russians that were part of that network. Now, obviously, we had a lot of people within the United States that were also in that frame of mind as well, that were not necessarily Russians. They were full-blooded Americans, if you will, right? And so, but they were more than sympathizers. They were also part of the Communist Party and so forth, right? A lot of those went kind of underground, so to speak, right? And where did they go? They filtered into various institutions and organizations. I mean, that's really what we have today. I mean, Operation Paperclip was another example where, Nazis were brought over because, well, we can't let the Russians,
Well, look
have those signs.
look
So
at
we got
look at von Braun, Jimmy.
yeah,
Von Braun invented basically the Saturn rocket that took us to the moon in 1969,
yeah,
1970, 71, and it concluded in 1972. That's
yeah,
German. That's Nazi science. They had the V2
yep,
rocket at the end
yep,
of the war. We didn't have
yeah,
rockets. They
exactly.
had the Messerschmitt jet. And, we're still flying around in little prop planes. I
Yeah,
mean, their
yeah, yeah.
science was 20
And
years ahead of anything
yeah,
else on planet Earth. I'm talking about
correct.
Nazi science here,
Yes,
to your
they were.
point. By the way,
Yeah,
this
and
is Inside Reality, right, Jimmy? Inside
yes,
Reality. With
yes,
Jimmy Tran, I'm Jeffrey Candelaria. We try to dissect truth. If you have a topic you want us to discuss, we're going to discuss it here. If you'd like to sponsor the podcast, Jimmy, how does one sponsor our podcast?
So you can sign up and support us through Patreon, or just go to our website, theinsidereality.com, and subscribe there and be a part of it. We have merchandise and so forth that you can definitely obtain. What we try to do is really just having these conversations openly, as opposed to, and then we invite you as well. I mean, we invite the listener to share. I know that you may not agree with our assessments on things. You may not agree with our perspective, and that's fine. I mean, and we invite you to put in the comment and share, what your thoughts are and your ideas, or, even adding a little more to what we're talking about. However, we do ask that you're respectful. I mean, if you're defamatory and all that, kind of stuff, then that's not useful for us.
No.
Jeffrey and I may not always agree on a particular topic, but we're respectful, and we respect each other, and so we that's the whole point of this conversation, is so that we can have that civil discourse. That's something that we are missing in our society today, and that's really why we created this podcast, is so that we can have that a civil discourse.
Well, I think it's respect. There's no question. I respect you. I like you. You're my friend. I agree with maybe 73% of what you put forth. I don't know. I'm just estimating, Jimmy, but I also think there's a certain civility and decorum that we're lacking in society as well. And we tend to dichotomize everything, Jimmy, in society. Like if you look at this pen, it's either this or it's that. You know what I mean? Where it could be a lot of things. You can take it apart, you can dissect the inside, you can look at the tip. So now it's not just two things, it's 49 things, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we try to do on this show, Inside Reality, is not dichotomize issues, but look at an issue and give it a multi-dimensional perspective, because everything is complicated. Even though we try to make things binary, I think that's what's really kind of sick of, in terms of this country, especially, is making things either this or that, and then drawing a line, and people are like forced to take one side or the other. I think that's just so dumb. So dumb. But anyway, also tell your friends, if they're interested in this kind of discussion, to listen to the broadcast, to tune it in, to view it.
Yeah. Yes.
Inside Reality.
Yes.
All right. What else do you want to talk about there, big fella?
Well, before we go there, I do want to point out something that, going back a little bit to what we were talking about in terms of this absolute truth and all that, right? And so one of the things you just brought up that kind of reminded me of it, I mean, there's no easy way to talk about this, right? I mean, everything that we're dealing with in terms of decisions have a lot of different facets to it, and certainly not everything is, like you're saying, clear cut one way or the other. There are various nuances to a lot of things. I mean, just life in general is that regard. Now, there are some things that have more clear and defined, parameters. I mean, we've talked about this, right? I mean, in terms of, like, for instance, the whole transgender stuff, for instance, right? So going back to that just real quick, just kind of, I know it's
my favorite topic, believe me.
Well, no. The reason why I'm bringing it up is because you just said that there is no binary. Well, that's the argument that the people on that part of the conversation says that there is no binary when it comes to gender, for instance, right? Because it's a social construct. It's a construct of society. Okay, how do you address that?
Well, I'm not sure where you're going with this, but I claim that there's no immutable truth, so I'm going to stay with that. I think right now in our evolutionary place, keep in mind, I do believe that at some point there was Australopithecus and Homo erectus and all that. So we are now Homo sapien. Well, I think we're actually Homo sapien. Mankind, as we know it, I'm sure I'll get in trouble for saying mankind, but I'm still going to say it, has been around in our present form, cranial capacity, bipedal, all of that, 10 digits on our hands and all that, for about, I believe it's 80,000 years, something like that. I could be wrong, but I think
not
it's
Homo sapien. Not Homo sapien. I think Homo sapien, according to, it's much younger than that. Well, we have the internet.
We'll look it up. Anyway, so what I'm saying is, in our present evolutionary capacity, on that scale, you got two genders, XX, XY, man, woman. Is it my birthday? What the hell was the balloons there? What's going on? Is it the hot air balloon in Albuquerque? What was that? I saw balloons there. Anyway, you got XX, XY. You with me so far?
Yeah. Yes.
So, in 50,000 years, maybe there'll be a third sex or fourth. I don't know. But right now, man or woman, that's it. There's my argument. Yeah. So right now, based on the rules, which I did not invent, and based on frames of references, a born male, as an adult, in my view, should not play volleyball or football or weightlifting and compete equitably with a woman, born woman. So there's my stand there.
Yeah.
40,000 years from now, when we're on Pluto or Mercury or Zeta Reticuli, and there's a third sex because evolution has continued to evolve, whatever the hell that means, we have to refine the rules at that point. And equitability or justice or fairness will mean something else at that time.
Yeah.
Okay? Remember,
Okay.
women didn't even have the right to vote until 1920, whatever the hell it is. So, you talk about changing rules, and all these people like, oh, so alarmed with changing the rules. Society changes the rules all the time. So let's not be so surprised. Muhammad Ali,
Yeah.
the greatest athlete other than maybe Secretary the Horse, who I think doesn't get his due, the horse, is the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali, right? And I admired him because he gave up 3 years of his prime athletic capacity in his 20s to stand up for not going to Vietnam, because he says, why should I kill some yellow guy in Vietnam when I can't even go to Louisville, Kentucky and go to a Woolworths and order a sandwich because I'm going
Yeah.
to get thrown out. So
Yeah.
I'm just talking about how we've adjusted to the black injustices in the last 50 years, and there's still racism everywhere. I know I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but to answer your question right now, as far as the transgender issue is concerned, at least in the world of fairness, you got two rules based on our evolutionary place. You got woman, you got man, XXXY. A born male should not be able to play with females under the auspices that he is a she. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Well,
But
okay. So,
anyway,
yeah. So according to the Smithsonian Magazine, Homo sapiens been around for about 300,000 years. So
okay,
we were both off.
okay. Well,
Right.
all right.
That's what they
But
say
that's
here.
not
I
very
mean,
long in the term,
no,
in
it's not
terms
in
of,
the
and so,
scale
keep
of
in
things.
mind,
Yeah.
Earth right now, according to astronomers and geologists, is basically 14 billion years old, right?
Yeah.
So that's 14,000 million years. So
Yeah. Yeah.
150,000 years is not very
Yeah. It's
long
definitely
relative
tiny.
to the geological scale.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, just also to be clear too, is that, I mean, it's not just the Homo sapiens that have this evolved two gender or two, male and female. If you go across the whole animal kingdom, they also are paired up in the same way. I mean, there are no third. I mean, there are certain animals that may have but they're very 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 not they're more in the amoeba kind of levels, right? That more like asexual, where
Yeah,
there's
but
no
aardvarks
sexual
don't have,
difference.
if you're an aardvark in the aardvark world and you're the
Sure.
president of an aardvark bank, you don't get
Yeah.
fired because you're not transgender. So
No, I get that.
I'm not sure
But
what
yeah,
any of that means.
no, I'm just saying that even in the animal kingdom, there is no. I mean, the evolution there is the same too, where they also only have these two gender. I mean, I don't think I know of any other case that has more than that. I mean, so
I don't know.
yeah.
I think
Anyway,
the platypus is the only mammal that can lay an egg. But anyway, I'm not
but
sure.
that's all. But that's different, though. That's not
Yeah, no,
necessarily because
I'm being
female.
I'm being silly.
Yeah. Now there is one. I mean, in terms of this discussion, and we'll kind of leave it here too. Is that the argument that is presented is that there's a difference between the biological, right, and the social, and so the argument is that, again, I'm not an expert in this, but my evaluation on what I've read and come across in terms of this is that societal, the gender thing is societal, placed upon the individual by society, rather than this what you're saying is
Yeah,
the
but
genetic,
that's not a good argument,
biological.
because a lot of people who are bald wish they had hair. A lot of people that are short wish they were tall. What does that mean? I mean, you got to deal with what you are, man. I'm not a tall guy. I've had to deal with that all my life, but I don't let that define me. So I wish I was 6'3". You know what I'm saying? I'm like 5'7.5", whatever. I'm just telling you, that's not a good argument, because life's tough. It is nonsensical for this society, who's a privileged society relative to the rest of the world, to continue to whine and complain about everything all the time. Life is intrinsically not fair. Get over it. Make the most of whoever the hell you are. Make a contribution and go on with your damn life, man. Sorry. Life's not fair.
we'll leave it there for now.
There you go.
I'm sure we'll circle back to it again when something comes up. But anyway, going back to topics we want to talk about was really the digital divide, right? I mean, this is something that I think it's an important part of our conversation that I know it's a bit of a leap from what we just covered. I mean, what we covered was a fairly heavy topic, but I think that it's important that we have a conversation about this thing called the digital divide. I mean, there's different nuances of the digital divide. Obviously, it's the access to digital technology like high-speed internet, computing, and all that. That's one part of the digital divide. But the digital divide also has a generational element to it. And we were talking about this offline earlier. And I think that it's an important part of the conversation that we have as well, because I think that before COVID, for instance, right, the world and society kind of lived kind of in this offline, online world, kind of separated, in a way, in a big way. However, when COVID hit and the world kind of shut down physically around us, I mean, stores closed, everybody was, sheltered in place and everything, right? I mean, for the first time really in human history, we had that kind of a pause, even if it's for a few months, but we did. I mean, like literally the whole global society.
Yeah, our government institutions of bureaucracy basically imprisoned us. Let's be honest.
Exactly.
We were put in jail for 6 months to a year and a half, 2 years, by institutions, mostly bureaucratic, who are not accountable. They put us in jail. I don't know what it was like in Yugoslavia or Siberia or Tunisia.
Some of those
but I know what it
worse.
did. I know what it did to my business. It shut it down.
Yeah.
And we were in prison, and we were forced to wear those little stupid cloth masks and 6 months or 6 foot distancing, none of which was empirically verified by any kind of science other than that little midget Fauci guy. And we just did it. It was astounding to me that we just acquiesced like that as a population.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that actually, raises a number of different threads of conversation, and I definitely want us to dissect and unravel some of that. But today, I want to just talk about specifically, because of our limited time, at least this whole idea of the digital divide, where we shifted into a little more of a hybrid society, right? I mean, I kind of lived for a long time on the digital side, just because that's my world, right? I mean, I've been in the digital or technology world my life. I know that you're on the other side of that divide, in terms of you have limited technology interests and pursuits and so forth. And so that's, again, it's not a right or wrong. It's just that's where we are relative to things. Now, what's interesting in my observation is that, what was interesting is that when COVID happened, right? I mean, literally when the world was shut down physically, everyone was dragged over that digital divide. We did lose some people. I know that I've lost some friends that didn't make it over that divide because, I mean, a good friend, elderly friend, her husband had a stroke and died shortly before the whole COVID thing. And then so for the next few years, she was basically shut in with no one really connecting with her. And the only option, because nobody was allowed to connect with her because physically she, and so it was just sad. Her children don't live in town. And so the only way that she had access to anyone familial was through a screen, in a machine. And, we can dive into that whole thing, in terms of the humane aspect of it as well. I mean, because I think that that's also an important part of our conversation that we need to have. I don't think that the people that did it to us, I don't think that I give them a pass for a little bit, but not for all of it. Okay. Especially when they started keeping us from talking about this, right? I mean, that was the one big thing as well. I mean,
absolutely.
People that pointed this out, like this podcast, if we were to do this a few years ago, it would have been canceled. I mean, we would have been canceled and we would have had all kinds of stuff on us. And that's really, a sad state of where we are. I mean, you probably heard of the Milgram experiment, have you?
Of course.
Okay, so
where you had the guys in little doctor outfits shocking people to death or whatever because people obeyed authority. It's incredible. It was based on the Nazi thing. That's what that was all about.
Sure. Exactly.
They wanted to know, how did the German people move from,
Logical people.
Bismarck to Hitler, and it's like people just are acquiescent to authority. It's
Yeah,
amazing. It's
it
incredible.
is.
But um, anyway, as far as that's concerned, what really bugged me about Fauci and those other goofballs is they should have, I just wish they would have said, we really don't know, but we recommend, instead of they came across as we know and you will do this as like authoritative dictators. And of
Yeah,
course, I'm sure they probably felt like, there was some hubris there, and maybe they felt like, they needed to be more definitive about whatever because they wanted to offset panic and all that. I don't think that would have been panic. I just wish people would have given the option. We recommend you wear a mask. We recommend you separate yourselves a little bit from other people. But if you want to go out, you're going to take a risk. It's your
yeah,
own. I guess that's the libertarian in me that just, if you want to go out, go out. But we don't know definitively if these protocols work. We think they do, but they came across as like definitive, and that's what really bugged the hell out of me, you know. And
yeah,
also just shutting down certain businesses, but not other kinds. And keep in
yeah.
mind, people weren't allowed to go to school. People weren't allowed to go to church.
Actually, people are not allowed to go to the beach, which was
I know,
that alone was the most telling to me,
right?
that this was a game of some kind, because the safest place you could have been was outside
Yeah,
in terms of this. I mean, because according to air quality assessors, people that do research in that, I mean, indoor air quality is 5 times worse minimally on any given
absolutely.
day,
Even now,
and so
it is right.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Correct. And so that's the part that, I mean, when they keep saying, well, trust the science. And then, so of course, now I don't want to get down to this rabbit hole too deep because I want to come back to our digital divide kind of thing. I mean, um, when you think of that, what do you think about what
So I'm
that,
a baby boomer, man. I grew up, climbing trees, building ant farms. I played golf outside. We played army, climbing walls, me and my brother. And now I see all these goofballs with these little climbing a tree virtually and all that. They're like little gelatinous, little pudgy little teenagers. And we were outside, literally climbing trees, making tree houses, building little rockets, you know, all with our BB guns, shooting birds, all that stuff, being mischievous little kids. You don't see that much today. Part of it is also, I think, there's this sense of lack of trust with neighbor and crime,
that's, yeah,
and kids being abducted. And I'm not clear. When I was growing up in the 60s, 70s, as a kid and as a teenager, I don't know if the, molesting kids, kidnapping kids, all that stuff was going on, like in community environments, neighborhoods, right? Or if that's an exaggeration that we, the people, accept as a truth now. I won't let my little 12-year-old boy or girl ride a bike around without a chaperone. When we were kids, and we didn't grow up in a very wealthy neighborhood, we were in a blighted, lower middle class area, but kids were outside all the time, riding bikes, running around, walking to the store. And I don't remember, Jimmy, all these stories or statistical metrics that established that kids were being molested and kidnapped and raped and all that. But today it seems to be, and I'd like your thought on this. You're younger than me. Is that really statistically and empirically verifiable as veracity that kids are being subject to all this crime relative to 50 years ago, 30 years, 40 years ago when I grew up? Or is
yeah,
it a
that's,
is it a myth? I don't know.
yeah, that's a good point. The thing is that I don't think that we have a full analysis of that necessarily, although there's a lot of different factors involved as well. So keep in mind something that's very important, I think, and that is we shifted from the 1970-ish, okay, until today. Okay, so from the founding until roughly 1970, the United States population was about 170 million, 150, 170 million. Okay, but from the 70s until today, that's roughly 50 years, give or take. Okay, our population we're now at close. We're pushing 350. You know, we're almost at 350 now. So we've doubled.
Did that take into account all the illegal aliens under the Biden administration?
That's just the population size, right? I mean, you're looking at the size.
That's a whole different topic, by the way. 30
absolutely,
million,
that's
20
another
million.
topic. But we've doubled our population. So think about it this way. Prior to that, right? I mean, you know, because really the United States was formed in the late 1700s, late 1700s, 1776 forward, right? In 1789.
Yeah, but remember my people, the Spanish were here in New Mexico in 1610.
No, I understand. But
it's not like there wasn't a population here.
No, but you're not part of the United States, though. That's what I'm just talking about the United States and the expansion and the acquisition of land and so forth that, you know, the United States accumulated over that time, right? I mean, so if you look at that trajectory, okay, you can see that the growth of the population was, you know, steadily, right? And in many ways, time has one important element that it contributes to, and that is allowing for assimilation, allowing for adoptions of different values and principles and so forth, right? I mean, especially when you got this idea, which is going back to what we've talked about before, the Constitution, but then the Constitution was really the tool that was instituted to enact or allowed the Declaration of Independence, the vision of this new nation, if you will, right, to emerge. Okay, so that's the backdrop. At least, again, this is my assessment.
Well, we're really going down a different tangent, but you have the Declaration.
They're connected, though.
You have the Declaration of Independence, 1776. Jefferson basically. Then you had the Articles of Confederation.
Yes,
we didn't have a constitution. We had Articles of Confederation, which were basically which basically empowered the states. I think there were 12, 11, whatever the hell it was, to have the power. There was no federal centralized government. We had the Articles of Confederation that were the operating architectural governance of this country. Nobody knows about that. Nobody talks about that. And it was only people like Madison, Jefferson, Hamilton, who really wanted, well, mostly Hamilton and his followers wanted a more centralized, federalized governance, because they were recognizing that the states were really in conflict with each other, and there were a lot of issues going on.
Correct.
So we should probably do a show on that. But then the Constitution was formulated 1787.
87.
But even then it had its issues. And then a couple of years later, you had the Bill of Rights.
Yeah, well, remember, the Constitution wasn't ratified or wasn't fully adopted until the Bill of Rights. So that was part of it. It's like, okay, again, you can look at it from multiple dimensions, right? I mean, in terms of that. One is that, like you said, mostly it was the state that was in play. The Bill of Rights was really established so that the individual
rights.
Yeah, individual rights.
You got federal, you got state and individual.
State, and then you got individual, exactly. And so that's the level of governance that needed to play out, and that's really where the evolution of things are. And so you're right that as a general society, we've lost that connection and we lost that understanding of the flow. And this is where we can dive into how the Electoral College was part of that construct to maintain and balance that structure and stuff like that. So anyway,
are we concluding? Because I've got a time limitation here. Because again, I'm being completely honest. Because it's called Inside Reality. I've got a time constraint here. So
no, we're going to be wrapping up. So any last thoughts? I know that we kind of jumped around a little bit. I want to go back to our digital divide part of the conversation.
As a baby boomer, I played golf. I climbed trees. I fell on. I got stung by a bee. I got stung by an ant. I never played a video game. I have no interest in video games. I don't like looking through a binocular and pretending I'm riding a horse. I'm going to go ride a damn horse. That's the baby boomer in me, and I don't apologize for that. Okay. And by the way, when we were growing up in school, I went to Catholic school. And again, don't get mad at me, but there might have been two fat people in the whole school. Now, I was watching football yesterday, right? It happened to be a Sunday. It's astonishing how much bad food is promulgated throughout that 3 hour window. Like every fattening, immensely caloric oriented, non nutritious food is just thrown down, no pun intended, our throats, watching like a sporting event. It's no wonder that kids today, adults today, are not in very good shape because of what we're digesting. And we're not outside doing. We're not verbs, we're nouns. That's a whole different topic. I was taught as a baby boomer, be a verb, not a noun.
Yeah. No, I definitely see that there are these challenges that we're facing, and I'm actually excited for some of the things that are being surfacing in terms of some of that, right? I mean, like the food additive discussions that we're now having on a national stage, not just, these were things that were only happening and conversing within the very small groups, but now that it's been raised to a more national level, I think that it'll be interesting to see, especially with like RFK Jr., taking on that. And I don't know how much of it he'll be able to accomplish, given that big ag and big food and big pharma, these are big like institutions that have a stronghold. I mean, that's what you're seeing. I mean, those are dollars.
But until we think about something and talk about something, you can't do anything. So at least I think he's going to compel us. RFK Jr., who I'm happy about. I don't care about his conspiratorial issues. I'm talking about what he's talking about with calling out food. What's good food? What's bad food?
Yeah.
And just as we conclude, I just wish as a society, we would re-embrace, because I think we did this for a period of time, meritocracy and achievement, celebrating excellence again, instead of all this nonsensical, life's not fair, mediocrity nonsense, okay? I'm talking about the heights of art, the heights of literary capacity, the heights of science, all of it, and celebrating excellence, because good is the enemy of great. All right, don't forget Inside Reality with Jeffrey Candelaria here, Jimmy Tran.
Yes.
Tell your folks to watch and listen to us.
Look forward to it. And we definitely want to jump in to more topics and expand on some of the stuff we talked about. I know that we did in today's session anyway, we kind of went around a little bit, but we definitely want to engage with you as an audience. We certainly are engaged with each other and the different, ideas and so forth.
Yeah.
So thank you, Jeffrey. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you soon. And until next time, you guys get out there and live
Ride
openly,
a horse, climb a tree.
Yeah, and let the inside be your outside, as they say. There you go. All right. Thanks, Jeffrey.